Welcome to this episode of the Strong Kind Podcast. This episode is with Eliana Lin, who is a physical therapist and running coach. She runs Up and Running Performance in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and she just started a gym. It was a great conversation. We talked about a lot of cool stuff, how she came back from a very traumatic knee injury to run again, pole vaulting, opening a gym, being a business owner, running, and strength training. It was a great talk. You can find her at eliana.lin.dpt on Instagram, or you can check her out at upandrunningperformance.com. Check out this episode. Let me know what you thought and leave a review. Thanks so much. All right, so Eliana, what got you into running? You ran collegiately, Correct?
Uh, Technically, yeah. So I actually pole vaulted collegiately.
Oh,
I stayed away from most of the running for most of my life.
okay.
Um, and then at the end of my collegiate career, I got hurt. My I hurt my knees really bad, had a bunch of surgeries, things like that. I wasn't able to come back for my fifth year of eligibility. And so instead I took up cycling because that was pretty much the only thing I could do at the time. And this was during the whole COVID era too.
Mhm.
And then from cycling, I went to triathlons to long distance running. So kind of a different path than most people take to distance running.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, all right, so like there's like multiple places I could go from there. What got you into pole vaulting?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. I grew up playing volleyball, basketball, like gymnastics, all the different sports. I've pretty much played every sport there was. But my sisters were doing track and field. And so they were like, just when you get into high school, come join the track and field team. It's fun. I said, okay, but I really don't like running. So I'm going to try all the field events. So I got there, I tried all of the different field events. They were like, hey, you used to do gymnastics, go try pole vaulting. So I tried it, loved it. It was so much fun. Had a little bit of natural talent, is what the coach, he was like, you got to keep doing this. So he sent me to this pole vaulting club, which people don't even know that these things exist. But it's like the club version of track and field. He sent me to one of those, and I started training really seriously there and was doing it all year round since my freshman year in high school. And just kind of fell in love with it. I never thought I would like track and field. I was just doing it because my sisters were doing it.
Hey, it sounds like you stumbled upon like something that engaged you in a way that I think that happens to people more than we like. I think it's good. Like you didn't want to run, you found your thing, right? You kind of fell into that niche spot. I've actually like heard that from like multiple pole vaulters where they were just like here jump like do this thing and see how it goes. So you started in high school and then you kept up at collegiately, correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
yep.
super cool. What does the average person not know about pole vaulting that like you figured out? Like your conception was like, oh yeah, you just run. I mean, it looks scary as hell. Like, let's just be honest. Like, you got a giant pole. You're literally like jamming it into a small slot, right? And then you're like flinging yourself over a bar. But like, what did it? I'm sure. Like, just tell me about like what your experience was and what was like scary about it or what was cool about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that is one of the bigger misconceptions with it. Everyone is like, oh my God, that seems so scary. That seems crazy. But when you first start out, you literally drag the pole on the ground, you put it in the box, you jump, and you put your butt on a mat. And you're jumping maybe 4 feet in the air. So you're not going very high or very far. You almost don't even notice you're leaving the ground at all. It's so, so small. But then it's crazy to see the increments that you make and how by the end of the season you're jumping maybe 8 feet. And then, so it's very gradual how you go up in height, which makes it less scary, I think, because you don't start falling from 10 feet in the air. You gradually get there, which definitely helps with the feeling scary. You still have to be a little bit crazy to try it. That is absolutely something. Um, the other thing that maybe was different for me going into high school, I was pretty scrawny and no muscle, just kind of could go upside down. And my first pole vaulting coach, he was like, "You're lengthy and scrawny, and I want you to turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger over the summer." Like, that's what he told me. And so I spent the whole summer, my freshman year, lifting. And that was a huge change for me. I thought I didn't know anything about lifting. I didn't think I would necessarily even like it, but it was something I wanted to do to just get better.
Hmm.
Ended up really liking it, and it totally transformed my sport. Like my freshman year, I jumped 8.6, and I think my sophomore year, I jumped 10.6. So like massive improvements in 1 year, and I attribute a lot of that to that summer, like going through the growth process.
What do you think, like, why did you go from like, I mean, you had a reason to do it, but then you started to enjoy it. Like, what do you think you started to enjoy about it?
I think I just loved the number one, the fun of it. I think going like running and going upside down and falling is so fun. It's about I always used to say I wanted my superpower to be able to fly. And so I always say it's the closest thing you can do to get to flying.
Yeah.
Um, and I've always liked sports like that, like downhill skiing and just things that are fast and fun. So I thought that part of it was fun. I'm also really competitive. So it was something where I could be competitive with myself, not necessarily have to rely on somebody else. Like I like team sports, but it really was a true test of all the hard work you put in. And I like just challenging myself in that way to see if I could get to the next step. Um, so yeah, I think those are like probably the big things.
Yeah. Super cool. All right, so talk to me about your injury journey and then ultimately like coming back from it. Lessons learned, but like yeah, just tell me about what happened and then did you it kind of this pertains to it. Did you plan on going to physical therapy school before all that, or did you like go to physical therapy because of that?
Yeah, so I was actually already in PT school. I did a 6 year direct entry physical therapy program. So I was in it before I even started track.
Gotcha.
It definitely added to my love for it and my love for rehab for running, which we can kind of get into.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the knee injury itself was at a meet, probably the most traumatic experience of my life. I was jumping at actually a PR height. I came down and my spikes got stuck in the mat
Mm.
and I stiff legged the mat
Ooh.
and I tore everything.
Ooh.
I tore my ACL, my MCL, my meniscus, my patellar tendon, and my hamstring all at once.
Ooh.
It was brutal.
That's pretty brutal. That's
Yeah.
making me bubble up inside.
Yeah, it was like my leg was basically dangling, is what it felt like.
Yeah.
And that process, everything got worse. Every doctor's appointment I had, like at first they thought it was just my ACL and MCL. Then, like each doctor's appointment, they found something new.
Mm.
Ended up rushing me into surgery a week later to fix the patellar tendon. So they did half of the surgery right away. 6 months later, they did the other half. That was kind of a tough process because I built all the way back up to running again right before my second surgery. And then I was like, okay, we know we're going in, we know we're starting over again. Um, did that. And then through all this process, it was during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 7 different PTs because they kept getting furloughed.
Mm.
Like it just was a lot of changing care. They wouldn't put their hands on me. It was a very complicated process. I also, this is again kind of all over the place. During the middle of that rehab process, my knee got stuck. So I couldn't bend my knee more than 80 degrees for 6 weeks.
Ooh.
And it was brutal. It was so brutal. There were lots of tears. And I had this one PT, which was probably the most foundational piece of this, who was like, it's okay. We're gonna just do things. We're gonna squat, we're gonna jump rope, we're gonna do all of the things. I don't care that your knee doesn't bend. And then from there it just started to get better. And it probably took me about a year to get back to real running after the second one. And that's probably where I found my love for this rehab for running stuff for sure.
I like that PT because like you just gotta do stuff. Like I think we build out all these protocols and constraints and rules, and then it's like, let's this I got 80 degrees of flexion, like let's work with it, right? Let's do what we can do. It's one of those things where we're in such an intellectual field and we do really want to have like really linear maps for people. And ourselves, like yeah, clinicians, like I'm trying to always toe the line between like tons of data and like actually okay where are we at, right? So like tell me more about when you're working with runners and rehab for running, like where do you start, where do you like how do you lay it out, because runners like to run. I My number one axiom for like a runner is like they're either running towards something or they're running away from something, and we need to figure out what that is, but also like they're gonna want to run, so like let's manage that. And like even me, I've gotten back, I ran a lot in high school, and I've gotten back into just like running a mile. Like I ran a mile at like 9 o'clock last night because I had to, because I hadn't done my work for the day. But it's just like it's so freeing, right? And you're just like, especially like even that felt really good. But tell me about your process and then ultimately like why runners are the way runners are, in your opinion.
Yeah, yeah. So I would definitely say in the like rehab space, strength training space, I have the opposite problem as a lot of people where like toning down some of the running, not like trying to encourage more running. Like most of them are doing way too much. Um, but a lot of it is getting them to see in the beginning that the strength training is going to keep them running. So
Hmm.
that's a big piece of the stuff that we discuss. Like, hey, this is going to keep you doing the things you like to do and not having to take time off.
Hmm.
So that's definitely a big conversation I have with a lot of people. I would say in general, like the way that my process works, and again, I try to also toe the line of being very data driven versus, okay, let's just get you doing something and something that you enjoy. So I always start the process with some form of assessment, runner's assessment that we do so that we can figure out maybe why a person's having a certain issue that they're having or where the performance piece is lacking, things like that. And then based off of that, we work on building a program together where they can still get the running in that they want, but also get the strength training in that they need. And this is where it becomes more personalized, individualized based on what they actually like. If they're like, man, I hate strength training, I don't want to do it, but I know I need to do it. Okay, fine. Can I get you in here for 20 minutes? Can we do a few exercises that are going to be good for you? You don't have to spend an hour and a half here. So there's definitely that bucket. And then there's also the bucket of people who actually really enjoy strength training, just don't know what to do with it.
Hmm.
And so then we build out programs there. So again, it's kind of towing the line of let's use all of this data that we get from the assessment, but also let's be smart, reasonable, functional about this and just get you doing something with some weight. Because a lot of the problems I've found with the runners is that they're not doing any weight training at all and they're taking a lot of load while they're running. So if I can just get them to lift something, we're doing better than where we started.
Yeah, 100%. I think like the way I'm thinking about it more and more is like I want to be like test driven, like the test that the patient wants or the test that the client wants. Like, I just think it doesn't really matter if we lay out like the perfect plan if like they don't care, right? Like, and yeah, and then the second piece of that is like, whether it's powerlifting or it's running, you have like people are doing they're doing super specific work, and like to feel better, it like kind of requires you to have some movement variation, right? And like runners, like lateral movement, like lateral strength, right? A little bit of power. Like I see you doing your power cleans on a regular basis, right? Like teaching people even just conceptualizing like force velocity curve, and like when you're running and you run for an hour, like that's a ton of foot strikes, right? And they're relatively low level, but if your peak strength is only here, like that's actually a decent amount of your capacity. And people don't know, right? So I love that. What are the big problems that you kind of hinted at it, but like that runners come to you with?
Yeah, I would say It definitely varies. It's usually like this is going to be a little bit broad, but it's usually something that has been nagging them for months or years, or like this thing that is just keeps coming back and back and back. And it's usually like a hip or a glute pain that just won't go away, or the inside of the knee pain that just won't go away, or a foot pain that also just won't go away. Or they do this thing where they'll run a race, it goes really, they have a ton of pain afterward, they take their month off and then they get back to it and then it just comes right back.
Mhm.
So that's probably the most common pattern that I see. And again, it just comes down to that load management. They need to improve their load tolerance. Like you said, power and lateral movements, none of them are doing that. So just incorporating that. And it's honestly amazing how much better they feel once they start adding in little things. It's usually pretty quick that they start to feel better too, which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't like pain that makes sense in like pain that makes sense from like a biomechanical structure like standpoint, like it's pretty easy to make go away, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of the other psychosocial type stuff that like if there people have had long-term pain in it, and like especially active people, it's like it's not crazy hard to make stuff go away when people are active and you can find modifications and like their mindset is on board. When you talk about like load management, like when what do you try to convey to people to help them understand what that means?
Yeah, so generally, and I have this conversation all the time, is I talk to them about how many foot strikes they're having out on their runs and how much body weight they're taking. So you're taking anywhere between 3 and 7 times your body weight, depending on how fast you're actually running.
Hmm.
And you're doing that over the course of maybe it's 6 miles, 13.1, 26.2, however many miles they're doing. And then you watch their face light up. They're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, that is a lot of load. So then when I say, okay, the only way to be able to tolerate that load and for your tissue to get stronger is to load it here in the weight room. We're able to replicate some of that weight by adding weight in here. And usually that clicks for them, and then they're like, that makes total sense. Like, okay, I'll do it. And that's usually the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good the foot strikes conversation and the like laying it out, like that's where I think data really makes sense in our realm. It's like, all right, so you did 275 pounds on a deadlift for 75 reps. Like, I'll get like people who are like into CrossFit and I'm like, your max rep, your 1 rep max is 320. You just did more than 80% for 75% for 75 reps. Like your back is not gonna feel great. Like,
Right.
and so what we want to do is like drive up your 1 rep max or just be okay with doing 225 for that reload, right? And it's the same thing with runners. It's like and this is my other big thing, like it's like what I have found too, because I would go run 5 miles like balls to the wall, like after football practice or after soccer practice. I was 17 years old. I would put in ACDC and I would just freaking go. And it was me managing, it was probably just nervous anxiety and just music and stuff. And like I went back, so I played rugby in college and I was skinny and fit and but I wasn't very strong, which was like not really good for rugby. But I could run all day, right? And I played rugby at 33 years old 2 years ago, and I was way stronger. When I hit people, it was better. When I tackled, it was better. But when I moved, it felt awful. Like I was my calves were straining and my like ligaments were just like, oh, this is not good. Because I hadn't done it. And it was really hard for me to be okay with like walk jogging or like walk jog intervals or just starting really chill because I could run fast, like I could run probably still like a 6 minute mile if I wanted to, but
Right.
it would have been awful like the next day and for a few weeks, right? So like do you see that a lot of times where people like they'll take a break and they'll try to jump back in where they're at, or they're where they were or at their best.
All of the time. All of the time. People are like, well, I could do this last year. Like, I should be right there right now. I was like, it's been a whole year. You've had all these things that have happened. And I think also a lot of people do struggle with easy running. They're
Mhm.
always running too hard or not running easy enough on those longer, easier runs. And so that's definitely something we talk about. And I think also that's also where some of that science comes in, being like, if you run easier, you're going to improve your threshold and then you'll be able to run faster for longer. But I see it all the time. People burn themselves out from just, they go outside and they're like, okay, I'm going to run these 3 miles as fast as I can. Or they'll be preparing for a race and they're like, if I run easy, I'm not going to get any faster. So I see that a lot of times too. It starts playing mind tricks with them. Like they know they need to run easy, but then when they're on their run, they're like, if I'm only running 10-minute miles, there's no way I'm going to run a race at 750 or 8-minute mile pace, even though that's not truly how it works.
Yeah. It really is hard. I mean, our egos are so like when I was building up my ability to like power lift, right? Like I you see like the linear progress from week to week for a long time, or you can see that. And then also like there's a lot of marketing out there that makes it seem like, and like look at the fitness content. It's people running fast, right? Like, and it makes you seem like, oh, I should, yeah, how is building a base going to help me achieve this? Well, like leveling your floor up is kind of the game in all sports, right? Do you know who she like wrote a book like Bravey? She's like a marathoner.
Yeah, Alexi Pappas.
Alexi Pappas. She was on the Rich Roll podcast and talking about like it was really hard for her to like accept like slow running and building, and also only like she's like I only up my mileage by like 5% per year for like 4 years. And but she's like it ultimately led me to be like the best I could be. But she's like a lot of runners just they can't tolerate that amount of boredom, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And like
absolutely.
that's what I think about all the time is like it doesn't mean that you shouldn't play and you shouldn't have fun with your training and stuff. I think there's a lot of room for that, but like a lot of your training is going to be kind of boring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually one of as you're saying all that, I'm thinking about how Strava has kind of become a problem in that. Like everyone's seeing everybody else's paces, and depending on who you follow, you're like, oh, well, they're running this at this pace. I should be doing that. And that's not necessarily the case. Like, for example, I follow a lot of collegiate and high level runners. I am nowhere near as fast as them. So if I'm comparing my runs to their runs, they look so different. And I think that's also tricky for people where they're like, I should be running that fast or things like that. So that also has definitely played a role.
The
Um,
competition's very good, but I mean, this is one of the reasons that I really haven't started like a CrossFit style gym is because like a lot of people, it can be good, but also like most people don't need to be doing that hard of a training, like of training 5 days a week. It's actually hindering their ability to make progress. It's just become this stimulus that makes you feel good. And don't get me wrong, it's way better than not exercising, right? But there is a difference between like training for an activity and for performance down the road and like me and at like at 17 I could just go and just and I actually when I really think about it, it was like I was only doing that like 3 times a week, right? So like at least even as a kid, and I was probably eating like a horse, like full boxes of cereal like on a regular basis, right? um but like now as an adult with different constraints and stuff, like for me to be like I probably could get back to that level of running if I wanted to, but there'd also be like trade-offs like in the gym, like I'm not going to perform as well there, and you got to kind of figure some of that stuff out too. So um when it comes to all right, so like when it comes to the Strava piece or the competitive piece, like how do you have like that conversation about, that type of stuff with people?
I try to bring it back to their goals. So, okay, you see all this. Let's ignore this for a second. And what are your goals? Where are you trying to get? So, and then they'll lay out a goal. Maybe it's a time goal, a race goal, a no injury goal. Okay, what have you done in the past to try to get there? And usually it's like, okay, I was running too fast. I was doing too much, things like that. I was like, okay, well, did that work? No. Okay. So then it's kind of then taking that conversation to, okay, here's the science behind how this is going to work and why this easy running is important. And that kind of usually goes pretty well. And then it's also the piece of, okay, is it possible for you to ignore what's going on Strava? Like, is that possible? Some for some people, they need to hide their runs or just stay off of Strava for a little. They're like, this isn't actually good for my mental space, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, they're more worried about what other people think of them, less so they don't really care what everyone else is doing, but they're like, oh, if somebody sees this, they're gonna think I'm slow. So they may just hide what they're doing. Or sometimes it's just being like, okay, how if you saw this person run this speed, are you really thinking about that? Like, do you actually care what they ran? And like, oh, I guess not. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, same thing in reverse. People don't really care. It's a form of just being social and talking to people. Think of it in that type of a way. And that usually kind of gets all the roots of the problem.
It's where that biopsychosocial aspect, the psychosocial, right, and the psychological aspects too, right? Oh, so we can try to kind of transition off of that because I think about like starting your business and being on like Instagram and seeing other like influencers like that can eat at like, oh, am I being successful? Am I pushing hard enough? Um and we utilize Instagram as like a way to find people or a way to broadcast what we're doing, and that can be really advantageous. But it also can create a lot of like imposter syndrome. Has that crept up in you as you started your business in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for sure. I would say so. I'm running a half marathon in May. And definitely building this business and working with other runners. And I work with runners of all levels. I have some runners who are really, really fast, and I have some very beginner runners. And almost just being in this world all the time, now I feel the pressure of seeing what everyone else is doing and being like, I better perform for this half marathon. And I know that's not necessarily the case, but it is how it feels, where it's almost like if I don't perform, then people are going to be like, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing, or things like that. That definitely has crept in. And so I even have to get myself out of that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it really comes like because I'm the exact same with you. Like, I am not a very gifted power lifter. I'm not a very good Olympic lifter. I'm not really gifted in like much of this stuff. I love it, and I enjoy it because of just how it really is like a personal development tool for me, right? But like, I mean, I lifted in a meet. I mean, I'm not old. I'm 35. Like, I'll be 36 in August. Like, I don't feel old. I feel beat up because I'm training hard, which I think is part of the process to some degree, and I can accept that. But like, I went to this meet and like I really do like Olympic lifting, and I see continuing to do it for a long time. But like, your ego is immediate. Like, am I going to be the weakest person there? Or am I going to miss my lifts and look like an idiot? Right. And I'm supposed to be, and I coach this stuff. Like, I coach people on how to do it. Or I coach people in powerlifting and I think the thing that has really helped me and, in the last probably year, truly, but it's a never ending game, is like, just screw it. Like, I'm gonna just do the best I can and have fun, and I'm gonna smile and I'm gonna enjoy it because I really do think like when we just make it play, it goes well, right? When it's just a form of play or challenge that we want to pursue, it's good. When we start to like worry about what other people are going to think or how they're going to beat us or something, like, we add another layer of anxiety that we don't need, because you don't perform well with that type of stress on yourself, right? You perform well when you're just doing the thing you know how to do as best you can, right?
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
where's your half marathon at?
It's in Traverse City, Michigan. It's the Bayshore half.
Okay, is it hilly?
No, it's not. It does this really mean thing where you run up a hill. The first thing you do is run up a hill, and then the rest of it's flat, which is
That's
great.
Yeah. What type of runner are you? Do you have like, would you categorize yourself in any way, shape, or form?
Oh, that's a good question. I that is a really good question. I more run. I run pretty conservatively. I will say I'm still considered a more beginner runner in terms of distance running. Distance running takes years and years and years to get good at,
Hmm.
and the longer distances are newer to me. So when it comes to running a half marathon, I go out pretty conservatively, and I'm there to have a good time, like you said. The whole point is to have fun, enjoy it. It's this stress reliever. The Bayshore Half Marathon is great because it's on Lake Michigan.
Hmm.
So, and people are lined down the entire way. Like the whole 13.1 miles, there are people. And the marathon does an out and back. So you pass the marathoners on the way.
Hmm.
And so when I go into a race, it's kind of like we're just gonna finish, we're gonna enjoy it, we're gonna cheer everybody else on. Last year we were cheering on the marathoners. I found some girls to run with. So I'm more of just have a good time, don't stress yourself out type of a person. I find that works best.
That's good. Well, your husband's a runner, correct?
Correct. Yes.
What type of runner is he?
Oh, we could not be more different. He is all competitive. This is the warm up that we're gonna like. He was controlling my warm up last year, basically. He's like, "This is what we're doing. I'm gonna run at this pace," and he is very structured and competitive when it comes to running races. He can't help it. Like even if he wants to have a good time, he can't help it.
I think one of the biggest things that's helped me in the past like year and a half to 2 years, and it's really been the last few months, is just to realize that people are just wired really differently, right? Like from a mental standpoint, and it makes so much sense, right? But I do think we have this bias to think that other people think the way we do, or that they should think with the way we do, and I realize more and more like, no, it's. I mean, honestly, I was kind of talking before we hopped on that how this has been a crazy week, and I've got like an event coming, and I'm such a I'm a top level thinker. Like I am detail oriented in some respects, but I also am like it'll sort itself out type of stuff. But like I've kind of botched a couple things in the past 2 days, and my wife has saved my butt because she's super detail oriented, and I think that's how a lot of relationships are, right? How do you respond to your husband like being direct with you? Do you take it well, or do you just have you learned to brush it off, or what do you think?
We've definitely had our ups and downs.
Oh
I
yeah.
have actually talked about this on my Instagram a few times where I'll be like, guys, it's okay to be different. Like
Yeah.
me and my husband are training for the exact same race, and our training could not look more different. You really could not have two more different training plans. We have all the basics. We have our runs, our faster runs, our strength training, but they look so different. And so over the years, we've kind of figured out what works best in terms of he doesn't tell me how to do my runs and things like that purposefully. I don't tell him how to do his runs and things like that purposefully. And we're just there to motivate each other and enjoy each other's company. And as long as we come from that perspective, both of us, it works well. And he'll go on an easy run, but it's my hard run, and he'll pace me.
Yeah.
So I'll tell him what to do. He doesn't get to decide what we do. I tell
Yeah.
him what to do, and then he's all for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've definitely figured it out, but we have had our hiccups where I'm like, I'm not taking it that seriously. It's okay.
Yeah, you got to work trial and error and realize like when so I mean whenever me and my wife are in the garage gym at the same time like I think it's a fun environment, but like she'll ask me a question and she'll be like, and like my tone will be a little bit like snippy, and she'll then her tone will change, and then you just like get this in this vicious cycle, right? So you got to watch it, and then you got to learn, and ultimately like what's most important is your relationship. But I think it is cool that he can pace you, he can run a slow run and pace you for your fast, and like that's totally cool. Like those are good compromises in there, right? You mentioned how running plans can look really different. Like what are resources, or how did who do you go to, who do you trust for like running programming or thinking about runs, that type of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So, it's kind of a combination of everything. I do
Mhm.
have a coach myself because I
Is it
don't.
Dan?
It's Dan. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Dan. I love
Yeah,
Dan.
Dan's great. It's been going really well, but I have found that because I do this all day long and for different people, and I myself compare myself.
Yeah.
to other people. It's just easier to have somebody else control my training.
Yeah.
And I trust him, and we've had great conversations, especially with my knee history and things like that.
Yep.
That's been great because again, his training is totally different than what I have a lot of my people do too.
Yeah.
So that's part of where I get some of my information. But then just going through the research, seeing what really works, what really doesn't work. And then also using clients' experience as well. Like a lot of the clients know their bodies really well. Like they don't work really well off of really high mileage. That doesn't feel good to them. It feels better to have some cross training in there and a lower mileage approach. That's me personally. I don't like to run really high mileage. I like to run low to medium mileage and cross train with my bike and weightlifting.
Hmm.
There's some people who are like, I feel great running 100 miles a week.
Hmm.
And so then we work in the strength training that they need to keep up that 100 miles a week. And
Yeah.
so it's a little bit of a combination of my personal experience, the research that's out there that has shown what does work, what doesn't work, but also understanding everybody's an individual and has preferences and trying to build that into the programs as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good approach. I mean, coaches having coaches is the same reason that people benefit from having coaches is because like taking it off of your plate and taking your like tinkering out, like, because that's what happens. Like coaches will just start to be like, can I do this? Can I do this? And it's like, that's fine, but like let's have a base template that like we can adjust from. Like let's have a game plan that we can adjust, as opposed to like you like running high mileage, so let's just you just like you're just gonna do it, but then you're just running yourself into the ground, right? Or you don't really like high mileage and you're gonna do too little of mileage to actually benefit yourself, right? Like that's kind of the I would also say this, and this is one of the things I've learned in the past 3 years is like I used to um I used to start with like I used to try to tell people what I thought they should do. And now I ask them what they want to do. And then I mold that a little bit based on what they want. Right. And I just repeat that process as much as possible until like we're at this place where they feel really good and they're moving in the direction of the results. Right. Because I think what happens when we have our like PT brain and is like, well, this is the way it should be. And it's like, well, there's a lot of ways to do it, right? And you and Dan like working together and doing it slightly differently, and even you might get to a certain phase too where it just you want it to be differently and it can still achieve what you want, right? And that's really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. I just actually had that conversation with somebody yesterday about what they should do. They were saying, well, what do you think I should do? All these coaches are telling me these are the different options to run. It was like 1600, 800, 400, and where to train. And she was like, what should I do? And I said, well, what do you want to do?
yeah,
And then we picked which race she actually wanted to focus on. And I was like, okay. So based on that, here's some options. This is how you can train for the best, but here's all the options. And that was a good way to kind of come
yeah.
into.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's like if you're trying to listen to what people are telling you to do all the time, like especially when they're not like in a direct relationship with you, because really what we're doing is building relationships with people and trying to just help in best the ways best possible, right? So no, I think that's really cool, and I think that's a great. It's one of those things. The more we can suspend our ego and like just help, the better things go, right?
Yeah.
Um, all right, so you started up and running performance, and you did not have a gym when I first met you. Although I don't even know if that was on the radar, but
No, it was not.
in the
Not
last
at
few
all.
months, you have gotten a gym going. So, what have been the few biggest lessons about like starting a gym, specifically for runners, right? But yeah, what have been some hardships or lessons learned so far?
Yeah, nothing is what you expect it's going to be. Setting up the gym was a totally different process than I thought it was going to be. Was it super fun? Yes. Was it rewarding? Yes. Was it really challenging? Also, yes.
Yeah,
Just finding equipment and getting it actually moved into this space, but then also having to deal with all the operational costs and insurance and just figuring it out. It was a big puzzle to put together. And we did it really quickly. So that was also a little bit of a challenge. But it was really cool once it came together and totally worth it. The other big challenge was figuring out how do I structure this gym for runners? Like what do the runners actually need and how can I help them? And one of the things about gyms for runners is they're really scary, they're really intimidating, and they have no idea what to do.
Hmm.
And so my goal is to ease that process and figuring out the best way to do that and to help as many runners as I can was definitely a challenge and still something I'm working on and tweaking and just figuring out the best way to do it for people. So I think that's still where I'm playing around with the logistics. They're always confusing, but we figure them out. This is more like the big level thinking that I'm working on now.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's always going to be like the lower level logistics and the higher level tactics and stuff like that. But I love the mission of you know, making it less. Gyms are, man, I love gyms, but like they're annoying spaces to be in. Like, and I mean this in the way that like the average like 40-year-old woman isn't gonna feel comfortable like going into like the university recreational gym or even to some extent some of these other gyms, right?
Mhm.
Because people don't know what to do, right? Even if they kind of have an idea what to do, it's like it's not always perfect, right? And just the perception of like judgment or all these things is tricky for people. So I think your mission's awesome and I think it's really cool. I'm like also just really like proud of you for just jumping in and doing it when the opportunity arose. Um and I think it's like gonna pay off really well. Like when is your I mean not when, where are you located? You're in Michigan, right?
Yeah, I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Ann Arbor. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, and it's up and running performance, correct?
That is correct.
All
Yep.
right. So like that's I mean it's gonna be good. And like Ann Arbor, I'm sure Ann Arbor has a good running community, I assume.
It probably has the biggest running community I have ever seen. We joke that you can't leave your house without seeing a runner. It doesn't matter if I leave my house at 5 a.m., there's people running. It doesn't matter if I leave my house at midnight, there are still people running. I've been tracking this probably for the last 2 months since my husband mentioned it to see if I've ever left my house without seeing a runner, and I haven't. So that's really cool. It's just a great place to be. The group runs here are great. Everyone is always running together.
Hmm.
But that's part of what has made this so cool and this mission so fun is there are so many runners, and anytime somebody comes in from downstairs, because I'm above a running store and
Hmm.
our running companies below us, people will pop their heads up from the store and be like, oh my god, this space is for runners. And I was like, yes. And they're like, that is the most needed thing in this town. And I was like, that's so awesome. So
That's
it's
pretty
really
freaking
cool.
dope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Congrats. I mean, that's awesome. So like I guess, when it comes to, you know, if you're gonna talk, like if you're gonna broadcast your message out to like all runners in the world, like what do you tell them? Or maybe like runners more specifically who are they don't know about strength training, they don't know how it can benefit them, or they don't know what to do. Like what's your overarching message to runners who, need help with that type of stuff?
Kind of, that's a good question too. I would say basically everybody starts somewhere and you just gotta start. And the best way to do that is find somebody to help you, find somebody to at least give you some direction of where to go. Um, and then just start. Like you'll see a huge difference in your injuries, being able to run for longer periods of time if you just start. It can be as simple as starting with some body weight squats. Like if that's where you're at today, that's fine. We'll work from there and we'll get you to lifting with a barbell. That's absolutely fine. But just kind of coming in, like there's no expectations when you come. We got to start somewhere. So that's kind of my big broad message.
Yeah, no, I think it's beautiful. Starting simple, like squatting to a chair is a different stimulus than running, right? Squatting to a chair for 30 reps is a different stimulus than running, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, right? And yeah, I think I'm actually gonna post this. I have a post a little bit later. It's like stressing your body in different ways is good for your body, right? Like than what you're doing like all the time. And not being afraid of like sucking at things is also really good because I think a lot of runners, a lot of lifters, like they go to run and they're like, "Oh, I suck at this. I don't want to keep doing that." And it's like, well, it's still a good stimulus, and if you enjoy it, like who cares, right? Well, like, runners, it's like, well, you're gonna be bad. You're gonna be bad at strength training, quote unquote, and it's
Yeah,
okay, right?
I tell them that all the time. People get really upset with themselves for like they didn't do a squat really well, or they're having trouble with single leg squats, and they're really hard on themselves, and they'll be like, I need to redo that, redo this rep, all this stuff. Like, be kind to yourself. This is a new skill, a brand new skill. How long did it take you to get good at something else? Give yourself some time and you'll get better at it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it really, you're like, oh man, so dead on. Like, and this is one of my big things with like the strength and conditioning field and the PT field. Like, nobody is moving perfectly. Like, nobody is doing like they're really good at it and they're efficient at it. But like, you got to throw out this notion of perfect movement or that it's just figuring out how to do it better and be efficient and get stronger, right? So, super cool. Pitch yourself for me here and like tell us where to find you, what you're all about. Like give me like, drop your spiel here.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I've never done this before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Up and Running Performance, we're in Ann Arbor, Michigan, downtown, above the Ann Arbor Running Company. You can find me on Instagram at eliana.lin.dpt. You can also email me at upandrunningperformance@gmail.com. And then we also have a website, upandrunningperformance.com. I also do weekly newsletters, so if that's something anyone's interested in, they can always sign up through my Instagram or through my website. And yeah, my goal is just to help runners keep running. That's the goal. Have them never miss a race and keep running.
I posted on my timeline or my story of a 96-year-old finishing a marathon. And
So
did you
cool.
see that clip? Like,
Yes, it's so cool.
yeah, it's dope. I mean, I don't know when I'm gonna go into that marathon running arc. Like I probably it's like one of those things I gotta do because I haven't done it and I've ran a half. Not like a competitive half. I just went out and ran it, but like it is cool. Like I don't really care what people do. Like just do something. Like do something that gets you moving and you can do the rest of your life, right? So I love it. I will have all that stuff in the show notes. So I appreciate your time. This has been fun. I'll have you back on again, 6 months from now or whenever and see how the gym's going and we can keep talking running. So appreciate
Yeah,
you.
this is great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great day. See ya.
Yeah, you too. Bye.